I am going to tell you something that might surprise you. The number one reason container plants die in the summer has almost nothing to do with the plant itself. Walk through any neighborhood in August and you will see beautiful pots on porches and patios with plants that are crispy, wilted, or just plain dead. 9 times out of 10, it is because of what the gardener did not put in that pot before the plant ever went in. I lost 2 gorgeous boxwoods about 12 years ago, and when I finally figured out why, I felt silly because the fix cost me almost nothing. Today, I am going to share the 7 things I add to every single container before I plant, and most gardeners skip every one of them. Here is what you are going to walk away with today. I am going to show you a simple kitchen item that keeps roots from cooking in the summer heat. I will share a moisture trick that can cut your watering chores nearly in half, which matters a lot when dragging a hose gets harder on the knees and the back. You will learn how to make a heavy pot 30% lighter without sacrificing a thing. And I have 4 more steps after that, including one that most people have never even heard of, that will keep your containers looking magazine-worthy from spring all the way into fall. If you garden in containers and you want less work and better results, stay right here with me. Let me start with the one that sounds the strangest, and I promise you it works. I line the hottest side of my pots with bubble wrap. Yes, the same bubble wrap that comes in your shipping boxes. Now before you think I have lost it, let me tell you why. That pair of boxwoods I mentioned, they were sitting in dark ceramic containers right next to my driveway, and on summer afternoons the reflected heat off that concrete and the direct western sun turned those pots into little ovens. The plants up top looked fine for a while, but underground the roots were slowly cooking. Most plants can handle air temperatures well above 90 degrees as long as their roots stay cool, and that is the part people forget. The roots are the lifeline, and when the pot wall gets scorching hot, the soil against that wall heats up fast. So now, before I do anything else, I take a piece of bubble wrap and press it against the inside wall of the pot, on whatever side faces the strongest sun. Usually that is the south or west side. You do not need to wrap the entire inside, just the side that takes the beating. That layer of trapped air acts like insulation in your house walls. The pot surface can get hot to the touch, but the soil and roots behind that bubble wrap stay noticeably cooler. Once I add the soil, I just trim the top edge down so it does not peak above the rim, and nobody ever sees it. I have been doing this for over a decade now, and I have not lost a single plant to root burn since. If your containers sit on a patio, a driveway, a south-facing deck, or if you use those dark-colored pots because they look elegant, this one trick will save you a lot of heartache, and the cost is literally zero if you save your packaging materials, which I know many of us already do. Now the second thing I put in every container is something that changed my entire summer routine, and I wish someone had told me about it 20 years ago. I am talking about water-storing crystals, sometimes called hydrogel crystals or moisture-retaining granules. These are tiny little beads that absorb many times their weight in water and then slowly release that moisture back into the soil as the roots need it. For those of us who are over 60 and may be dealing with a stiff back or sore knees, anything that means one less trip with the watering can is a gift. Now here is where I need to save you from a mistake I made the hard way. The directions on the package will tell you to mix the dry crystals into your potting soil and then water heavily after planting. Do not do that. When those little crystals hydrate, they expand dramatically, and if they are expanding inside your pot, they will push soil right up and over the rim. I woke up one morning to find soil spilled all over my patio and a sad-looking petunia tilted sideways like it had been through an earthquake. What I do instead is soak the crystals overnight in a bucket of water. 2 teaspoons of dry crystals will expand into roughly 2 cups of gel. Then I mix that fully expanded gel into my dry potting mix before it goes into the container. That way everything is already at full size, the soil stays right where it belongs, and the moisture is available to the roots from day one. These crystals are not a replacement for watering, and I want to be clear about that, but they act like a buffer. On a hot day when the soil would normally dry out by mid-afternoon, those crystals are still slowly releasing moisture, And that can mean the difference between a thriving plant and a stressed one. They are especially wonderful for hanging baskets and smaller pots that dry out fastest, and for anyone who travels or just does not want to be chained to a watering schedule every single day. The third thing might seem obvious once I say it, but it took me years to figure out, and it has saved my back more times than I can count. Before I add any soil, I place an empty nursery pot upside down in the bottom of the larger container. Think about it this way. Most of the flowering plants, herbs, and shrubs we grow in containers have shallow fibrous root systems. They are not sending a deep taproot down 2 feet the way an oak tree would. A rhododendron, an azalea, most annuals, even tomatoes, the active root zone is usually in the top 12 to 18 inches of soil. So if you have a tall decorative pot that is 24 inches deep, you are filling that bottom 6 to 8 inches with expensive potting mix that the roots will never even reach, and you are making that pot incredibly heavy for no reason. By flipping a smaller nursery pot upside down in the bottom, you take up that unused space with something that weighs almost nothing. You use less soil, which saves money, especially when you are filling multiple containers on a fixed budget. And the pot stays light enough that you can actually move it if you need to reposition it to follow the sun or bring it under cover before a storm. If you do not have spare nursery pots lying around, you can use empty plastic water bottles with the caps on, or chunks of styrofoam from old packaging. Anything lightweight that will not break down or compress under the weight of wet soil. The only time I skip this trick is when I am planting a tree in a container, like my Japanese maple. Because trees do send roots deep, and they need every inch of soil they can get. Now here is number 4, and this is one that I think a lot of gardeners overlook, especially when they are in a hurry to get their plants in and see that beautiful finished look. I always place a small piece of mesh screen or landscape fabric over the drainage holes before anything else goes into the pot. You can buy rolls of fine mesh screen at the hardware store for almost nothing, or you can cut up an old window screen, or even use a piece of landscape fabric you have left over from another project. The reason is simple. Without something covering those holes, every time you water, a little bit of your potting mix washes out the bottom. Over the course of a season that adds up, and you end up with a pot that has settled and lost volume, roots that are exposed, and soil that is not doing its job anymore. The mesh keeps the soil in, but lets the water drain freely, which is exactly what you want. It also keeps slugs, pill bugs, and other little critters from crawling up into the pot through the drainage holes, which, believe me, happens more than you would think. I had a container of lettuce a few summers ago that was being devoured from the inside out, and when I finally tipped the pot, I found a family of slugs that had set up house by coming right through the bottom. A 2-inch square of mesh would have stopped that entirely. This step takes about 10 seconds per pot, and it makes everything that comes after work better. Number 5 is one that I started doing about 8 years ago, after I noticed that my container plants always seem to run out of steam by midsummer, no matter how faithfully I fertilized. I now mix a slow-release granular fertilizer directly into my potting soil before I fill the container. Most potting mixes come with a small charge of fertilizer already in them, but it is usually enough to feed plants for maybe 3 to 4 weeks, and after that your plants are hungry. Liquid fertilizing every week or 2 is fine if you remember to do it, but let me be honest, I forget. Life gets busy, grandkids visit, the weather is miserable for a few days, and suddenly it has been 3 weeks, and my petunias are looking pale and sad. A good slow-release fertilizer, the kind that comes in little coated granules, will feed steadily for 3 to 4 months depending on the product. I mix it right into the potting soil according to the package directions, so the nutrition is distributed evenly throughout the root zone. That does not mean you never liquid feed again, but it means your plants have a steady baseline of nutrition even when you get behind on the liquid feeding schedule. For those of us who want beautiful containers without making it a second job, this one change makes an enormous difference. You will notice the foliage stays darker green, the blooms are more abundant, and the plants just have more energy to keep going through the heat of summer and into fall. The granules cost a few dollars, and they last all season, so it is one of the best investments you can make for your containers. Here is number 6, and this is the one I think makes the biggest visual difference, and yet I almost never see people do it. After I plant my container, the very last step before I step back and admire it is adding a layer of mulch on top of the soil. I am not talking about a thick layer, the way you would mulch a garden bed, just about an inch of material spread over the exposed soil surface. You can use shredded bark, cocoa hull mulch, small pebbles, or even dried moss. What this does is remarkable for such a simple step. First, it slows down evaporation dramatically. That exposed soil surface is like a frying pan in the sun, and moisture is escaping constantly. A thin layer of mulch acts as a blanket, keeping the moisture in the soil where the roots can use it instead of disappearing into the air. Second, it keeps the soil temperature more stable, which works hand in hand with the bubble wrap trick I showed you earlier. Third, and I love this part, it gives your container a polished, finished look that makes the whole planting seem intentional and put together. I have friends who will compliment my containers and say they look like something from a garden magazine, and half the secret is just that inch of mulch on top. It takes 2 minutes and it makes the pot look twice as expensive as it actually is. For my money, cocoa hull mulch is my favorite because it has a beautiful rich brown color and it smells like chocolate for the first few days, which is a lovely bonus. But any mulch material will do the job. Just avoid anything that packs down into a dense mat, because you still want water to be able to soak through when you do water. And now number 7, and I saved this for last because it is the one that most people have genuinely never heard of, and yet the science behind it is fascinating. Before I settle my plant into the pot, I dust the root ball with mycorrhizal fungi. That sounds like something out of a laboratory, but it is actually something that happens in nature all the time. Mycorrhizae are beneficial fungi that form a partnership with plant roots. They attach to the root system and effectively extend it, reaching out into the soil much farther than the roots can reach on their own. That means your plant can access more water and more nutrients from the same amount of soil. In the ground, these fungi are usually already present in healthy garden soil, but potting mixes are sterile. There is nothing alive in that bag of potting mix to help your plant establish that partnership, so you have to introduce it. You can buy mycorrhizal inoculant as a powder or granular product at most garden centers, and a small container of it will last you through dozens of plantings. I just sprinkle a small amount directly onto the root ball or into the planting hole right before I set the plant in. You cannot see it working, but you will notice the difference within a few weeks. Plants treated with mycorrhizae establish faster, show less transplant shock, and develop stronger root systems. I started doing this after reading about it in a university extension article, and I tested it side by side one summer with 2 identical pots of the same variety of geranium. Same soil, same sun, same watering. The one with the mycorrhizae was visibly fuller and had more blooms by the end of August. I was sold. For us as older gardeners, anything that helps a plant take care of itself a little better means less fussing and worrying on our part, and that is exactly what this does. It gives the plant a head start on being resilient. So let me bring all of this together for you. Before a single plant goes into any of my containers, I follow these 7 steps. I line the hot side with bubble wrap to insulate the roots. I mix pre-soaked water-storing crystals into the potting soil to extend moisture. I place an inverted pot in the bottom to save weight and soil. I cover the drainage holes with mesh to keep soil in and pests out. I blend in slow-release fertilizer so the plant is fed all season. I finish with an inch of mulch on the surface to lock in moisture and polish the look. And I dust the root ball with mycorrhizal fungi to supercharge the root system from day one. None of these steps is expensive. Most of them use materials you probably already have around the house or can pick up for a few dollars. And not a single one requires you to get down on the ground or strain your back. Container gardening is supposed to be the easier, more accessible way to garden, especially for those of us who are not as nimble as we used to be, and these 7 steps make sure it actually lives up to that promise. Here is what I want you to do today. Go look at your containers, the ones you already have planted, and the ones you are planning to fill this season. Pick just one of these 7 ideas and try it on your next pot. You do not have to do all 7 at once. Start with whichever one solves your biggest frustration, whether that is pots drying out too fast, plants fading by August, or containers that are too heavy to move. Try one, see the difference, and then add another the next time. That is how I built up my system over the years, one lesson at a time, and now it is second nature. I hope this helps you enjoy your garden more and work less doing it, because that is really what it is all about at this stage. I will see you in the next one.